Welcome back to the NOTCAST, episode 302. It's been a week since I've last done one of these, and it's been 2 weeks since I've done one of these I'm just a boy sitting in front of his phone talking about records made before he was born episodes. Last week I was on holiday. I went to see Sophie Ellis-Bextor sing at the Lafayette in London. I went to see Peter Hook and Soft Cell at Rochester Castle. I went to Faversham. I went to some other places, saw some friends, bought some records, hung out with my brother. And you know, being a bloke of a certain age now, in fact more of a certain age than any other age, I went to Alexandra Palace, and guys like, weird impressive old buildings and planes. So that's exactly what we did. How very, very predictable. It was quite fun, it was quite nice, but I didn't feel a compelling need to do anything apart from really, honestly, just sit down and do absolutely nothing. So today, 10th of July, I am going to revert back to type, and instead I'm going to talk about a band and music that was made before I was born. That's how old this is. I'm going to be talking about Pink Floyd in the year 1969, a transitional year for the band. It was the year that the band released a soundtrack to More. Some of the members helped Syd Barrett record his first solo album. They started touring a concert piece called the Mass Gadgets of Oxemenes, also known as The Man and the Journey. Recorded the live album and studio solo album Ummagumma. There's one of the radio recordings of The Man and the Journey, and also recorded the soundtrack to the film Zabriskie Point, which was released in January 1970. So it was a very busy year. It was a transitional year for the band, and there were a number of major things that happened. Obviously, hot on the heels of the release of Piper at the Gates of Dawn and Source Full of Secrets, the band had lost their kind of leading light, I think, Syd Barrett, their main songwriter. This, by the way, is a mono version of Piper at the Gates of Dawn that was released originally for Record Store Day in 2017, and later in an edition that, apart from the copyright notices, replicated the original mono version of the album released in 1967. And here is a mono version of Source Full of Secrets, remastered from the original tapes by James Guthrie, Joel Plante and Bernie Grundman in 2019, 51 years after the album was originally released. Both of these are mono mixes. I have no idea if they're different from the stereo mixes, even though I've listened to them. They feel exactly like the stereo versions, but folded down to mono. Not like the Beatles ones, where they have different mixes and performances and overdubs and things like that. These feel like just mono versions of the albums that you already know and love, as opposed to anything that's even vaguely different. And obviously Syd left the group, and the band bought out from Syd the rights to the name Pink Floyd and any claim that he would have upon it, alongside the band's van, equipment and sound system, at £17,000. Now £17,000, inflation adjusted now, would be £247,137. So a substantial amount of money. Clearly they'd done so in the belief that the name Pink Floyd would carry with it a certain amount of commercial clout and potential. And obviously if they didn't think they were going to make that money back, they wouldn't have bought Syd out of the group. It was a commercial decision. The band had obviously drafted David Gilmour back into the group, or David Gilmour into the group to play guitar and sing vocals, and he obviously eventually became the leader of the band. And the band also made a decision in late 1968, after the release of Point Me at the Sky, and that decision was no more singles for Pink Floyd, as this reproduction of a newspaper article has it in the this is in the Early Years box set, by the way. The idea being that if you don't release singles, your singles can't be flops, because there were no singles to sell. So the fact that it wouldn't have sold anything probably wouldn't have been a big deal. This version of Point Me at the Sky, by the way, is the Italian 7-inch in 1973, following the success of The Dark Side of the Moon. The Italian label repressed a number of the band's early singles, including One of These Days, Free For and Money on 45, and put them back in the charts, trying to coin a bit of money out of the curious fans. His Point Me at the Sky is not a great song. It's okay, but it's clearly what it absolutely sounds like. It sounds like, and this is a representation of where the band are at the time, is a band that has lost its leader and it doesn't quite know what it's going to do next. So if you can think about Depeche Mode after Vince Clarke had left, and they were kind of going, well, what are we going to do next? Well, I don't know. We're going to carry on, I guess. Pink Floyd were in the same thing after Syd had left. They'd lost their main primary songwriter and mostly frontman of the group, and they were left with a conundrum, which is what are we going to do? Who are we going to be? And the band made the decision to record and release the soundtrack to a film called More. This was not the first soundtrack release by the band, or the first soundtrack that the band had done. They had done the soundtrack to Tonight Let's All Make Love in London, and a soundtrack for a short film called The Committee. This was the first album-length release that the band had made out of a soundtrack. They were paid £600 each for 8 days' work, which translates to £8,133, inflation adjusted. And what they did is they saw a rough cut of the film without the soundtrack in a cinema in a basement in London. They timed the relevant scenes with a stopwatch and wrote down their impressions of what each one of those scenes would be. And then they created soundscapes in the studio afterwards, using those words and those impressions and the length of the scenes to make them mostly match. What they didn't do was they avoided the need to what is called Mickey Mousing. So you think about someone like John Williams, when he does a soundtrack, things are kind of very precisely timed down to 1/24th of a second, a frame, to tell you exactly what to think, what to feel, and what is happening at each one of those moments. The moment that Indiana Jones swings over a crevice on a vine, there you get the Indy March. The moment that Darth Vader walks into the room, there you get the Imperial March. It's very clear and unsubtle. It very much telegraphs to you what your emotions should be and what you should be thinking and feeling at any given point in time. More is very, very similar to the soundtracks by Tangerine Dream, John Carpenter, Clint Mansell as well, to an extent, is that they are more impressionistic themes as opposed to clear telegraphings of emotion that tell you what to think or feel, or to how to act or behave at any given point in time. This is the soundtrack LP to More, according to the sticker on there, is pop. Lovely sticker, actually. And this is, I think, this is the Pathé Marconi Paris French version of the album, primarily because when I was buying Pink Floyd vinyl, this one was the version that was affordable and available at the time that I wanted to buy it. Therefore, the labels of the record have an importation sticker or an importation stamp on the vinyl to tell you that the payment has been made for tax purposes, so that no one's going to sit there and go, you're illegally smuggling the record in. So there we go. I suspect this isn't the original inner sleeve that goes with the record, because this is a British Phonographic Performance Limited standard generic bag, which for a French edition of the album means that it's not the same inner sleeve. I know some people are very, very particular about making sure that you have the same inner sleeves. I'm not, because frankly, a white paper bag is a white paper bag, and that's it, really. I mean, eventually, certainly when you're building a record collection, you might go, well, this one's got a good cover, but the record is beat up. The other one, the record is in fantastic condition, but the cover is beat up, and you end up kind of jury rigging two together and creating one good copy out of them. That's pretty much how I built my record collection when I was younger. It was all about, this is a music delivery device. That's what it does, is it delivers music to my ears, and that's really its primary purpose in my world. But this is the soundtrack to More, and this was it's not a great album at all. When you listen to More, what you can clearly tell is it probably by some people would regard it as a lesser album by Pink Floyd, and that isn't counteracted by the fact that, well, the band played none of the songs from More live, and they haven't played any of the songs from More live for a very long period of time. I think the last time they played anything from More live would have been maybe 1972 at a push, maybe. So, if you only play the songs from the album for 3 years after the album comes out, by the time you get to your fourth year, you're going to kind of think, the band are kind of embarrassed by it, kind of forgotten that the album exists. They don't really want anybody to know it's there. They're not proud of it. They don't think any of the material is good enough to play live. And as we know, live is where it's at these days. It is, as Rollins' band said, the only way to be sure. And if a band doesn't play the songs live, you end up thinking it's not particularly good, is it? Which is kind of yes and no. More as an album is somewhat unfocused. It has some good songs on it. The Nile song is particularly good. I quite like Green as the Colour, which they did play live until 1972. Cymbeline as well. Most of the rest they didn't play very often, if at all. Actually, I would say maybe 3 songs from the album played live. That's the kind of numbers you get when you're AC/DC touring your 16th album in 2024. And you're playing stadiums, as you play 3 songs from the most recent album, because you've got to prove to people you've got a new album. And those are the songs that people use as an opportunity to go to the toilet or to get a drink or anything like that. Talking of which, I really fancy a drink. Hang on. How's that for a smooth segue? So, starting in April 1969, following the release of More, the band toured because playing live was the way to make money and the way to make it work. And they decided they were going to start premiering a piece called The Masked Gadgets of Oxemenes, which features, here's a tour program from that period, which is reproduced in the early years box set. Musicland, featuring adverts for Somewhere in Berwick Street, something early from Pink Floyd, although they have got Piper at the Gates of Dawn and the Source Full of Secrets the wrong way around. There's a picture of everyone's favourite grumpy old man. Really wasn't a grumpy old man. Here is the Man and the Journey, part 1, The Man, and then that points out what songs that they're playing, which is a suite of both released and unreleased material presented together as a story that goes from morning until night. So it starts with Daybreak. Daybreak, by the way, from The Man and the Journey. And let me see if I can find a CD version of it. Hang on. Here it is. So this is the bootleg CD recorded from a radio broadcast in Amsterdam on the 17th of September 1969, although the band first played it live in April. And the first track on it is called Daybreak, which is a version of Grantchester Meadows. Grantchester Meadows is a Roger Waters song taken from the Ummagumma album. The second track on it is called Work, and that is effectively a live performance of the track Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, which later appears on Atom Heart Mother and is one of the very worst songs Pink Floyd have ever recorded. And then we have a track called Afternoon, which later appeared in studio form under the name Biding My Time, and was first released as a bit of bait on the mid-price compilation Relics that was released in 1971. Here is the original version of Relics that's on Starline, and it was, let me just quickly check where it says, Biding My Time, 9th of July 1969, and that is an illustration by Nick Mason there, by the way. Relics is a good mid-priced compilation that features most of the band's early album, non-album singles. That's only track 3. We then got Doing It, which is the party sequence that's taken from the soundtrack to More. And then we have Sleeping, Nightmare, and Daybreak. Daybreak being a repeat of Grantchester Meadows, a reprise of that particular track. Then we have part 2, which is the Journey. Journey has a track called The Beginning, which is Green is the Colour. We then have Beset by the Creatures of the Deep. That's a live version of Careful Without Hacks Eugene, or Come In Number 51, Your Time Is Up, or whatever it's called this week. Then we have The Narrow Way, which was a David track from the Ummagumma studio album. We have a track called The Pink Jungle, which is an instrumental version of Power Torch. And then we have The Labyrinth of Oxemenes, whatever that is. Behold the Tremors of the Temples of Light, and The End of the Beginning. And The End of the Beginning is the title track from Source Full of Secrets, effectively the Celestial Voices section that climaxes the track. And that is the way in which Pink Floyd presented a conceptual piece called The Man and the Journey, which follows apparently the story of a man throughout 24 hours of his life and through a journey from light to darkness and back again. So you go. I can't believe anyone would. I mean, who would look at a tour program like that and go, well, there's a Nick Mason, there's pop proms at the Royal Albert Hall, and then of course Rick Wright there had some unusual information. An advert for the alt magazine It, and oh my word, yeah. There's a photograph of the 4 members of the band, and that is the program for the Masked Gadgets of XMDs, also known as The Man and the Journey. The Journey and the Man, as what's his name said in that fabulous film Alien 3. And for many years, the only way you could really obtain The Man and the Journey would be a recording of this show in Amsterdam on the 17th of September 1969, which eventually did get a release in an official capacity, which was quite a surprise, as part of the early years box set. But this is the Italian version with some biographical information and a catalogue and some photos. And this effectively was, it certainly for many years, the missing link in my Pink Floyd collection. I had it, but it was kind of like a thing that kind of joined together some disparate pieces of work and presented them as new and unique arrangements. So The Man and the Journey, by the way, on the early years box set and on the dramatisation 1969 CD edition, which was released in 2019, well worth hearing. I'm glad that it's been released from its copyrighted prison, but it's not an amazing or essential Pink Floyd release. It certainly, if it was released alongside More, it would be regarded as a curiosity in much the same way that More is. And that The Man and the Journey, I think, was played between April 1969, premiered at the Royal Festival Hall, I think, on the 14th of April, all the way through to probably October 1969, when the album Ummagumma was released. But in the meantime, in April 1969, the band were also touring. It started a new touring schedule. They were playing what's called red brick universities that had been formed post-war, starting in about 1964 all the way through to the mid-70s. It was a new touring circuit. And so the band decided that what they were going to do was they were going to tour student balls, universities and nightclubs very frequently, resulting in this double LP, Ummagumma. The first LP is a live album recorded in Birmingham Mothers Club, which I have walked past. Obviously, I grew up in Birmingham, and a place called the College of Commerce in Manchester in June 1969. And I've got to tell you, the live material on this is incredible. It is some of the best live stuff I've ever heard. It does make me wish I'd been born in 1951 and I was 18 years old and I'd seen Pink Floyd in 1969. But of course, if I'd have been born in 1951, I would now be 82 years old. And 72 years old. And if I had been born in 1951, that also meant that I would have lived at the start of rationing, and I would have had to have undoubtedly liked prog rock music like Emerson, Lake and Palmer in 1976, because that music spoke to me and I had feelings, man. A terrible state of affairs for anybody. So I guess I take what I can get by being born 20 years later, right? 22 years later. So this is fabulous live LP, and in order to fulfill it out as a second LP, there's a studio album. I don't quite know why the inner sleeve is upside down there. So that's the first disc of Ummagumma, the live portion, which has the SHDW catalogue, and then here is the second part of it. This is probably my least favourite single Pink Floyd studio recording, primarily because Ummagumma isn't really a Pink Floyd album. It is 4 solo EPs jammed together in order to make a contractual mockery of the provision that it would be a studio album and would count towards their recordings. So it is 3 songs by Roger Waters, 3 songs by Rick Wright, 3 by Nick Mason and 3 by David Gilmour. So the first one is Sisyphus parts 1 to 3 by Rick Wright. Utterly forgettable, mostly forgotten. And then there's the 3 songs by Roger Waters, which are Grantchester Meadows and the terribly named several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving with a Pict, which is effectively a sped up and slowed down tape experiment by Roger Waters. It is unlistenable garbage made by an art school wanker who thinks that he's doing a fantastic thing and pulling the wool over everybody's eyes. It's bollocks. Don't listen to it. It's awful. It makes Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast seem like Shaft. Then on side 2 of Ummagumma, we have, again, 2 long songs. We have Nick Mason's The Grand Visor's Garden Party, Entrance, Entertainment and Exit, which is effectively a drum solo with flute by Nick's then wife. And we have The Narrow Way, parts 1, 2 and 3 by David Gilmour, the first solo David Gilmour release. Of these, the band only played Grantchester Meadows live and The Narrow Way. They didn't touch the other stuff with the barge pole because it was awful and nobody should ever listen to it. On the back sleeve of Ummagumma, we have this picture, which was inspired by a photograph of a post-war RAF unit where they laid out a plane and all the equipment and all the people that were needed in order to make it happen and everything. And they did the same thing with the band's roadies there, standing very elegantly on presumably what looks like an airfield somewhere. This was Pink Floyd's 3rd and a half studio record, and it wasn't very good, I think it's fair to say. I think by making it a double album, what they effectively did was they then said, well, if we make it a double album, that'll discharge one album off our responsibilities. We'll get paid in advance. We need the money. We've just brought Syd out for a huge amount of cash, so we need some money, and that's how we'll do it. So Ummagumma is by no means my favourite Pink Floyd record at all. It also has an unusual cover in so much as in this frame here, you have a repetition of this, but we have a different version of that. And then in the version of this frame that's in there, you have a much smaller version. And then in the version of the frame that's in there, you have an even smaller version. And it kind of just eats itself to the point where you can barely make out what the dickens is going on. In fact, Saucer Full of Secrets is the album. If you scroll all the way in there, Saucer Full of Secrets in a very very small fashion. That is the 4th Pink Floyd studio record. I can't muster any enthusiasm about it, really. I think what I will say is Roger's track Several Small Species of Furry Animal is a clear precursor to Roger's later work in 1970. He did the soundtrack to a film called The Body with Ron Geesin, and we also had a couple of the songs were played live by Pink Floyd, most notably, as I've said, Grantchester Meadows and The Narrow Way, but they never really stuck as Pink Floyd songs, if that makes sense. They weren't really played live much after 1971, 1972. So the live recordings were made, although it says June 1969 on here, the shows at Birmingham were on the 12th of January 1969 and the 27th of April 1969, and the show at Manchester was the 2nd of May 1969 as well. And so that was the Ummagumma album. In the meantime, and not yet released until January 1970, David and Rick did some work on Syd Barrett's solo LP, The Madcap Laughs, which was recorded between April and May 1969, released on the 3rd of January 1970, as alongside 2 days in July 1969 to finish the LP. And they recorded Octopus, Golden Hair, Long Gone, She Took a Long Cold Look at Me, If It's in You, Feel, Long Gone, and Dark Globe in August 1969 as well. So these are songs which eventually kind of took a life, but it's weird because very clearly, you know, Syd had left the group. He was, and you can hear from his recording, he had an unusual grasp upon reality that not many people did. You can listen to it, and I know some people have put their money on Syd being the one that would go to success, in much the same way as, let's say, when a band splits up and somebody leaves, nobody would have put their money on Robbie Williams being the big guy. Nobody would have put their money on Liam Gallagher being the big guy. people put their money on Syd Barrett, and Syd kind of faded to obscurity whilst Pink Floyd became successful, which is a strange and unusual kind of place to be. Following the recording of that, the band went on the road frequently and profusely. And here is one of the many myriad of bootleg live albums. This is live 1969. It's an audience recording from Southampton University on the 9th of May 1969, the same week as the performance at Mothers in Manchester. This comes on a very fetching shade of red. Well, quite why it isn't on pink, I don't know. But for some reason, it's on red vinyl, and I wanted a full live 1969 show. I was hoping that this would be one of the recordings that matches up to the quality of Manchester. It doesn't. It's an audience recording. It's pretty good as a show, and it's a nice live document of Pink Floyd in 1969, but it's not essential. It's not my go-to for live Floyd of this period. It is my live go-to is, of course, Ummagumma. Here's the 2 CD version of Ummagumma, by the way, that comes in an unusual box because it's 2 separate CDs to clearly indicate it's 2 separate albums. Here is the live album, and here is the studio album. And on the back of the live album, you have that, and on the back of the studio album, you have this. And it's 2 jewel cases with a sticker on a box and a fold-out poster, which, by the way, I don't think I've ever folded this poster out. So let's see what's on it. Oh, how exciting is this? The answer is not very. It is the cover to Ummagumma. Not many people will be hanging that up, I suspect. If you are, you're kind of well, kind of weird, but then anybody that listens to the studio portion of Ummagumma for fun is also kind of weird. I listened to it and it felt like it was homework, so perhaps I shouldn't have listened to it too often. The next thing that we did with Pink Floyd in 1969, December 1969, the band went into the studio to record the soundtrack for a film called Zabriskie Point. Here is the original 1970 vinyl edition of Zabriskie Point, which features 3 songs by the Pink Floyd. Those songs are Heartbeat Pigmeat, Crumbling Land, and coming number 51, Your Time Is Up. Pink Floyd recorded a lot of material for this film, so much so that the CD edition of Zabriskie Point comes with 7 bonus tracks on here. And those are they're not actually, they are Country Song, which by the way is absolutely brilliant, Unknown Song, and Love Scenes version 6 and versions 4 on the double CD edition that was released in 1997 of Zabriskie Point. There seems to be no real reason why this version was issued, apart from the fact that somebody somewhere went, hang on, we've got some unreleased Pink Floyd we can release. If we put a double CD out, and we include some unreleased Jerry Garcia and some unreleased Pink Floyd on there, I reckon we'll sell some copies. And that's exactly what they did. It comes in a double jewel box, and it has a booklet with, again, explanatory notes telling you just how good Zabriskie Point is, although I don't think it is particularly good at all. These were all recorded in November and December 1969, although released in early 1970, so straddling the periods. But there was this sense that the band didn't quite know what to do, so they did 2 soundtracks in a row, plus a live album, plus effectively 4 solo albums, much like Kiss. This was a period where the band hadn't yet found what their direction was going to be. They didn't know what songs they were going to write. They were working prolifically, they were writing prolifically, but what they didn't have, and they did have it when Syd was a part of the group, was this underlying kind of sense of a guiding light or a narrative or a plot that would make everything else all just kind of hang together in the way that, you know, the Big Lebowski's rug really held the room together, man. It was that kind of thing. Without Syd, they didn't have that. And so they were kind of casting around for various ideas, and hopefully they'd find something that would stick and work as a template. One of which being the Mass Gadgets of Oxemities. Here's a poster, I think, for it, although that could be the poster for Games for May from the early years box set. the soundtracks to More and Zabriskie Point, the live albums and so on. The extra stuff, because there's still more extra stuff on top of the Syd Barrett solo album, the 4 solo EPs, the live album, the 2 soundtracks, and The Man and the Journey, was this here, released in 2016. This is a dramatisation, a 2 CD and 1 Blu-ray, 1 DVD box set, which covers the band's extracurricular activity in 1969. And features a number of extra songs which hadn't been released anywhere else. This material includes, and I'll just read it out, CD 3 is The Man and the Journey, by the way. Well, CD 2 is The Man and the Journey, recorded in Amsterdam on the 17th of September 1969. So the first official release of something that had been floating around for very nearly 50 years here as a concert suite. So that's now has an official release. CD 1 features alternative versions of tracks from More, so Hollywood, Theme, More Blues, an alternative version of that, and a track called Seabirds, which isn't really Seabirds. It's an alternative version of a song. Seabirds is actually a unique Pink Floyd song that only appears in the soundtrack and of the film itself and not on the soundtrack album. A studio version of a track called Embryo that the band had started playing live. A BBC radio session on the 12th of May, which features Grantchester Meadows, Cymbeline, The Narrow Way, Green is the Colour, and Careful with That Axe, Eugene. And then live at the Paradiso Amsterdam on the 9th of August 1969. It was an instrumental set, which is quite interesting because effectively you get a 35-minute Pink Floyd instrumental live album of Interstellar Overdrive, Set the Controls, Careful with That Axe, and Saucerful of Secrets. For the DVD on here, you get some live material recorded in Paris. You get the rehearsals for The Man and the Journey. You get 2 whole songs, 20 minutes recorded in Germany, and then a Belgium live set of Green is the Colour, Careful with That Axe, Set the Controls, and Interstellar Overdrive with Frank Zappa, which I think is probably Montreux actually, although I'm not quite sure. And then you get some extra memorabilia inside your set. So let's look at this extra memorabilia and this extra crap that's here, because when are you going to get a chance? Pink Floyd at the Electric Garden. Pink Floyd light show at Amsterdam. That is for the Man and the Journey there. And the Paradiso in Amsterdam is one of my favourite venues. It's a converted church. It's absolutely gorgeous. Lovely venue. Really glad that I've been to see a show there. Pink Floyd's show with the Azimuth Coordinator at the Azimuth Coordinator is like effectively a concert version of multi-channel sound. That was at the Dome in Brighton. And then you get, oh God, what is this now? You get another bit of paper. I don't even know what this is. Pink Floyd Fan Club newsletter. There you are. Not the type of thing. And then you get some extra administrative text that details what's on the set and how it works. That was Pink Floyd's 1969, which I know I've kind of raced through, but it's difficult for me to grasp upon anything of real substantial meaning to me in More. More is a soundtrack album to a pretty crap film, and it's an incomplete release, and it works well as a soundtrack album. It doesn't work particularly well in any other configuration. Certainly as a standalone listen at home kind of experience, it's not particularly good. Oh yeah, so you get a psychedelic light show ticket as well inside your early years dramatisation set, and I think that's it. Yeah, so it's like having a little museum of Pink Floyd if you have the early years. On the box set of the early years, which is 27 discs, of which only 5 are reproduction 7-inch singles, by the way, you also get this set called Continuation, and this is a leftover extra stuff from the period, which is let's think, a CD and 2 Blu-rays and 2 DVDs. On the Blu-rays and the DVDs, and the reason these aren't in the main release is because they're lower quality. So it's like off-air existing recordings on cassette tape made in the 60s of sessions that the BBC have lost the tapes for. So, for example, on the CD, you will get you'll get radio sessions from 1967 and 1968. On the DVD, you'll get some extra material. So you'll get some stuff in Stuttgart, you'll get a radio show, and then also you'll get the films of Moore and Obscured by Clouds, which later is also known as La Valley and is on the 1972 period. It's absolutely inessential. Curious, sure, but not something that's going to be absolutely sit there and go, oh, I've got to have this. Although, of course, I said that, and I spent a significant amount of money on the early years box set when I could afford a significant amount of money, and now I'm at the point where I'm kind of sat there going, okay, should I have got it? Well, yeah, and I would only regret it if I didn't get it, but it's not amazing at all. Now, if you're a vinyl fiend, and that means if you're like me, you probably are, you will have noticed in 1970 a album was released in the Netherlands called The Best of Pink Floyd, and here is the 1974 edition, Masters of Rock, Volume 1. There was no Volume 2. And it kind of scoops up most of the band's non-album tracks. So unlike Relics, which has again a significant number of the band's non-album tracks on, this features Arnold Lane, See Emily Play, Paintbox, Julia Dream, Careful with That Axe, Biding My Time. This features Arnold Lane, Apples and Oranges, It Would Be So Nice, Paintbox, Julia Dream, and See Emily Play. Again, all recorded in the band's early years, and between this and that, you have 99% of the band's non-album material. Still missing Embryo, of course, but since that didn't get released until 1983, I figure we can give them a pass. So that's Pink Floyd's 1969. It's quite a short episode. I haven't talked about what these songs mean to me because they don't really mean very much to me. You know, it's a period of music that I like. I don't feel that this period of the band has really changed my life or as anything like that. I enjoy it. I listen to it. It's pretty good. But it's not music that I listen to and go, oh man, this music changed the way in which I see the world. It's not that type of stuff at this point. It took a little while yet before Pink Floyd got to the point of being, I think, more ambitious artistically and more effective as well, creatively and commercially. So with that in mind, this is where I wrap up my conversation for today, talking about Moore and Ummagumma and Zabriskie Point, of course. This is all a good period. It's not amazing. It's quite good. It's quite solid. I quite like it, but it's not going to change your life, I'm afraid to say. It's just if you sat there going, oh, I've not heard this, is it any good? Well, the answer is yes. Listen to it, buy it, love it, because I sure as hell ain't going to be making any more Pink Floyd studio records. But don't think that this is the great lost classic. Ummagumma most definitely isn't. It's my least favourite Pink Floyd album. And with that, I wrap up. I will do another one of these again, inevitably, hopefully quite soon. See you all later. I am going to go downstairs and I'm going to have an ice lolly because you only live once, and I really like the idea of having one. And if you're at this point in the episode thinking, I'm quite warm, and it is a British summer, well, have an ice lolly. I'm not going to tell if you are. I'm going to do it, and no one's going to tell on me, apart from you, and you wouldn't do that to me, would you? Of course you wouldn't. So, in the meantime, stay beautiful. I will see you all soon, and take care of yourselves and each other. Ta-ta.